Councillor Robinson, it should now say that you are live.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the November Rushcliffe Borough Council Cabinet meeting. Could I have any apologies for absence, please, Mrs. Tambini?
There are no apologies for absence, Councillor.
Any declarations of interest? No, okay. The minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of September 2020. If I could have those proposed, please. Councillor Edivine. Could I have a seconder for those, please? Councillor Moore. All those who are against accepting those minutes, if you could signify. No. Those as passed. Thank you very much. Item 4, opposition group leaders' questions. Any questions, Mr. Tambini?
No, there are no questions this evening.
Thank you. Any citizens' questions? No?
No, no questions.
Okay. So we'll go on to item 6 then, which is the revenue and capital budget monitoring for 2020, 2021. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you. This is the revenue and capital budget financial and COVID update, Q2. So it represents the budget position for both revenue and capital as at September the 30th, 2020. A lot has happened. That's a bit of an understatement, that, both during this reporting quarter and subsequently. And although this report shows an improving picture since the last quarter, the figures are very fluid and they are dictated very much by outside circumstances. The good news is an improvement in our anticipated budget gap from 422,000 deficit last quarter to 244,000 deficit at the end of September. This difference is derived from COVID-19 pressures offset by in-year efficiencies and government funding. Projections will continue to change as the impact of the latest lockdown is fully understood. Some of the major cost items impacting our operations are shown in Table 1. And whilst car parking, commercial activity and additional waste cleaning activity are clearly identified, the biggest cost by far is our leisure facilities at over £1 million a year support. It's a real shame that leisure centres that were open and were increasing their business levels have now closed again. Let's hope we can reopen them in December, both for our financial and, more important, our physical and mental well-being. I have mentioned in previous reports at Cabinet that we have the opportunity to reduce our repayments to ourselves on the outstanding internal loan for the arena. Whilst we have this facility, the decision has been made that we are unlikely to need that this year. The capital situation hasn't changed a lot since the last quarter, and we are still on schedule, although somewhat delayed by COVID, with our £38 million capital programme. Council tax update figures show we are currently receiving around 1% less than expected, which equates to £796,000. Majority of this goes to the county council, police, fire brigade, etc., and now will be balanced up over 3 years, which leaves a burden for everyone for the future. I have spoken at previous meetings in great detail about the grant schemes we have been running. These are pretty much now closed, and currently we're into a new scheme, which is somewhat more complicated, and the staff are working extremely hard to get this implemented. The latest news that we should be live tomorrow on this, and hopefully we should be starting making payments Monday next week. A couple of other items in the report I need to mention. An outcome from the community scrutiny group was to look at resources in terms of dealing with fly tipping and its terrible impact on our environment. Envirocrime enforcement is being subcontracted to a company called WISE, which is Waste Investigation Support and Enforcement. WISE will investigate fly tipping, and from my point of view as Cabinet Member for Finance, this is a cost-neutral operation, as their costs are recovered from fixed penalty notice. I understand this will be reviewed in 6 months and reported to scrutiny. The second item is the Development Corporation, which will be reported in more detail later on this agenda, but the budget has been adjusted for this purpose. To conclude, This quarter budget shows positive progress both on revenue and capital. However, changes are happening very quickly, and it's important we are still vigilant and maintain strong reserve to weather the storms ahead this winter and going forward, given the uncertainty that COVID has now created. There's a lot of recommendations, both A to F, so really I won't read them all out tonight, but I'm very happy to propose the recommendations as from A to F on page 17 of the report. Thank you, that's my report.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Edivin.
Thank you. As usual, Councillor Moore has given a very thorough update on and précis of the recommendations. And so I'd like to thank Peter Linfield and his team for all of the hard work that they've been putting into making sure that our budgets are well managed. And I think it's also a testament to the whole council that throughout all of these difficult times of the last 6 months or more, that we've been open for business. And we started that with maintaining our refuse collections when many councils scaled back immediately. And we've continued this by continuing to commit to, after proper review, to all of our major projects, such as the Bingham Leisure Centre and the crematorium. It is a very difficult financial management challenge that the council has kept on top of, and I'm very happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Edivin. Any other comments from Cabinet members? Okay, so I'd just like to echo those thanks to Peter Linfield and his team, and for all council officers. I appreciate these incredibly difficult times. We have important grants, a lot of work around the grants going forward as well, that we must support businesses going forward, and I'm sure his team will be dedicated and committed to getting those grants out to businesses through this very, very difficult time. I'm also very pleased, I think, with that capital programme. We're still focused. We want to deliver that capital programme, and we're still ambitious. I think that's a really important sign to all our residents and partners that we are open for business, as Councillor Edivin said, and that we move forward. So taking those motions as proposed by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Edivin, do you have anybody who is against passing those motions at all? No? Okay, so that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda, item 7, is the Development Corporation, which I will speak to and move. February 2020, the paper actually came through this cabinet about the Development Corporation approving our involvement there, as the business case was actually going forward to government to basically fund the business case for Development Corporation as we go forward. As always, we support the Development Corporation as a whole, but our focus is on particularly on the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station, which is a hugely important strategic site for us, both for jobs and obviously for economic growth. That power station will be decommissioned by 2025, so it's important that over the next few years that we do shape that site as a major part of the Development Corporation. As I said, it's really about bringing external investment into the actual borough itself. It's about bringing jobs and the economic growth. That's going to be so important. It was then, and it's even more important now, particularly as we go through the pandemic. At the moment, we have the oversight board, the Alchemy board, of which has the 3 borough councils and the county council actually sitting on the board, along with private enterprises and partners. And if I say that works over the top of the Development Corporation, there is a business case, a detailed business case going forward for March 2021, which will be submitted to government, which will then be considering the full case of the Development Corporation. And of course, parallel to this is also running is going to be the Freeport application as well. What is proposed and is reflected in this paper is there will be an interim vehicle actually set up and incorporated from January 2021. We obviously as a borough will be represented on that. The Development Corporation has applied to government for funding to fund this interim period. We're still waiting to hear from that. And once we do, we'll then have some idea at the financial contribution that will be actually made by Rushcliffe Borough Council towards this interim period, and also, of course, the conditions of any such payment that we actually make. If you look at page 44, 4.18, it actually just set out what the role of this interim vehicle will be going forward. So the recommendations that are actually set out on page page 39, they are basically reflecting the summary that I've just really given on that. So just going through those for memories, really just noting the progress we've made today at the East Midlands Development Corporation programme and the establishment of the interim vehicle that I've just covered. We're also approving the principle, and I stress this is the principle of making a financial contribution to support the interim vehicle over the next 3 years, subject to further negotiation agreement by council and subject to match funding from other affected local authorities and government, and thereafter the funding arrangements to be included with the medium-term financial strategy for 21-22 onwards. C, on the recommendation, request the Chief Executive prepare a report including further detail of the interim vehicle and Rushcliffe Borough Council's involvement to be ratified by full council in December 2020. And finally, recommendation D, improving in principle the council enter into the members' agreement and participating in the incorporation of the interim vehicle company, limited by guarantee, and it delegates authority to the leader and the chief executive for agreeing the final form of the members' agreement and articles of association, subject to the agreement by council. So I'd like to move those 4 recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Upton. You're on mute, Councillor Upton. Yes,
my apologies. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm very pleased to second the recommendations of this report. As you've said, the Ratcliffe-on-Soar power station is due to close by 2025, and that's not far away, given the context of these large projects. This will have a significant effect on the borough, both in terms of the large loss of the business rates and potentially a very large derelict site on this sort of gateway approach to the borough and the City of Nottingham. And we need to take action now, I think, to prevent this. It's one of 3 sites of the proposed East Midlands Development Corporation, and the details are given in the report, as you say. I am minded that the parliamentary process to establish new development corporations can take rather a long time, and it's time we can ill afford. I think rather than lose the current progress, this interim vehicle is the right thing to go with. That's why I'm pleased to support the setting up of the interim vehicle and the principle of making a financial contribution to support it, subject to the usual checks and balances as detailed in the report. So I'm all in support of the recommendations given in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upton, and absolutely to stress that the Chief Executive and myself, obviously, we're looking very carefully at that agreement when we know the final details. As you quite rightly say, these things through Parliament are going to take a long time, particularly with a lot of other matters that are queuing at Westminster. So but we keep our fingers crossed and we hope that interim won't become long time interim, and we will see some end of the journey, if you like, to getting this fully established, certainly before 2025, and we can actually move forward. And you also made a very good point there, Councillor Upton, that this is a major contributor to our tax base as well, of course, for business rates, and we shouldn't underestimate the impact that will have once the power station goes. So it's incredibly important to this borough that we support this vehicle and that we bring the jobs and the economic growth that we actually need into the area. Any other comments before we take this to the vote? Councillor Edevine.
Yeah, I'd just like to add how important, obviously, it is to support that, to support both the interim vehicle and in the future the Development Corporation, because not only is it an important site at Ratcliffe-on-Soar, but it's also the ambition that they have there and what we're going to see there, we hope, as in terms of industry and contributing very strongly towards a carbon neutral economy. And it's going to be so important for Rushcliffe as a borough, and as well as obviously the East Midlands as a greater whole.
Yeah.
So,
excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so if I can take then to the vote. So that is the recommendations that I set out on page 39, A to D, that have been seconded by Councillor Upton. Is there anybody against this recommendation? No? Okay, so we're happy to take that forward then. Thank you very much. If we could move now on to item 8, acquisitions and disposal policy. Councillor Edovin.
Thank you, Chair. This is a relatively simple paper here. We already have an asset management strategy in place, which we've recently updated, and it's in place to ensure that the council's approval is important to have a clear policy for managing acquisitions and disposals. This paper delivers such a revised policy, and that sits very, very well alongside the asset management strategy. Our asset policy is diverse and multifaceted, from strips of land to large plots, and community assets to investment assets. In Appendix A, it sets out the clear guidelines for officers and members to understand how and when disposals of acquisitions fulfil our corporate objectives. In particular, one of the additions to this revised document is the update on buying properties to house homeless people, and the provision of affordable housing in the future, should it be so desired. I don't really think there's much more I can say on this policy. It is very much to sit alongside our asset management strategy. So I have no hesitation in making the recommendation that Cabinet approves the acquisitions and disposals policy 2020 to 2025.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Edovin. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Brennan.
Thank you very much. As Councillor Edovin has said, the council does have a diverse and varied asset base. So it's really important that we're clear on what basis we will invest in new assets or divest ourselves of existing assets. And that any decisions we take in that regard are based on a really strong case, a case that will further our corporate objectives as a whole. It's particularly important that we're open and transparent in our decision making. And it's particularly a case that local taxpayers need to be satisfied that our policy is properly managed, continuously reviewed, and clearly supports the delivery of our services. And I think this policy sets that out clearly for everybody to see. So I'm very happy to second the recommendation to approve the acquisitions and disposal policy.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. As you quite rightly say, it's very important to have such a balanced and diverse portfolio, even more so as we emerge now from the pandemic and hopefully in the recovery period. It's going to be incredibly important, as our finances are under so much pressure, that we have this good balance of assets that obviously produces revenue, but also provide our communities with really important facilities. And I'm very pleased that over the years that we managed to accumulate this balance of assets has been so very, very strong. And so I will certainly support this paper. So proposed by Councillor Edovin, the recommendations as set out, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Is anybody against those recommendations? No, that's carried. Okay, well that now concludes the business. I would wish you a good trip home, but I think everybody probably is, by the looks of their backgrounds, probably